All right, hello everyone. Thanks for joining us. Okay, it's about 11 a.m. right now. It's 11:01, and now we're gonna go ahead and get started. And good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are at in this great land here. And welcome to the first of 2023 webinar series hosted by Titan HST. And my name is Todd DeVoe. I'm the host of the Titan HST's Business Continuity Today, and I do a lot of academic and research and stuff for Titan HST. So this is the exciting thing that we get to do is have conversations with great leaders like Chris. And the Titan HST series brings us great speakers, helpful information, substantial discussion around safety and emergency management topics. So in case you missed the webinars, the links are available in the chat. And so you can find us on YouTube, and we'll put that link right into the chat. But we want to know that the second half of today's session that we will answer questions, and you can put those questions in the Q&A down below. Not so much in the chat. I mean, we may lose them there. The chat is more for logistical problems that we might be having. So, well, let's get into it. I want to introduce our great guest. So Dr. Rodriguez, is the Director of Homeland Security and Emergency Management. In his role, he serves as Homeland Security Advisor to the State Coordinating Officer for the District of Columbia. He's also the State Administrative Agent for all Homeland Security and federal grants funding for the district and the National Capital Region, which includes parts of Northern Virginia, Maryland, and he's responsible for emergency planning, preparedness, and response and recovery for the city, including 24 Operations Center and Washington Regional Threat Analysis Center and the district's Intelligence Fusion Center. And the cool part about Chris is his background is he's served as director of New Jersey's Office of Homeland Security for 2014-2017, doing many things over there in New Jersey. And he was also part of the Central Intelligence Agency, where he became a senior analyst for counterterrorism in the center. In this position, he monitored terrorist groups in the Middle East and South Asia, and closely collaborated with the U.S. intelligence community, partnering with the federal, state, and local levels to identify and counter counterterrorism. That's the cool stuff right there. Chris, I know we're going to talk about what you're doing now, but what was it like working during the time, like after September 11th, in the agency and really kind of protecting America's assets across the world?
Well, thanks, Todd, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk to everyone today. It was a fascinating time. It was a scary time. It was also a hopeful time where I think we saw the country come together and really dedicate itself to dismantling, disrupting, destroying the network that hit us on 9/11. So to be a part of that was extraordinarily fulfilling and very rewarding. And time in my career when I really look at it and look back very fondly on it and as some great years. But what I'm doing now, as the Director of Homeland Security in Washington, D.C. is equally as fulfilling and very exciting.
I want to get into a bunch of different questions regarding technology and what you guys are doing. But what is it like to really be, at that position? Because DC is a really beautiful and unique city, and there's a lot going on there. If you guys have never traveled to DC to visit, you must do it. But I mean, like every day there's some sort of weirdness happening, either it's on federal grounds or if it's on city grounds, it's protests, things happening. What's that op tempo like for you, our organization?
We've been in a constant state of operational tempo for years now. I mean, really since COVID, and so I think the events of over the last several years have really taught us that we need to take care of ourselves, that we need to lean on our partners, that relationships are important. And we've really tried at the Homeland Security and Emergency Management Agency to do that and to live that with a lot of all of our employees, because and I know for your listeners, we've all been through a lot over the last 3 years. I was recalling in an all hands meeting yesterday to my workforce that yesterday, 3 years ago, was the first day that we had our first sort of incident management call on coronavirus, and look how far we've come. And so it has been a long 3 years. But we got to keep doing what we're doing. Our goal as Homeland Security Emergency Management professionals is to protect the safety and security of the people who we serve.
Yeah, and obviously, everybody in DC, it's a high profile place with a lot of high profile people, and so I'm sure that keeps you on your toes. And so it seems like, from what I understand, we were talking about this earlier, that you're developing a new emergency operations center / fusion center, and that seems like an exciting thing. It's always nice to have a brand new place to go. To talk a little bit about that.
We're very excited, and what COVID taught us again is, in Washington, D.C., our facilities, our infrastructure simply was not sufficient to handle a long and prolonged disaster of the scale and magnitude of COVID. And what we did during the pandemic and in the years following it is really try to advocate for getting a new space, making sure that we were resourced at the level of the expectations that were placed on our agency. And we will be occupying a brand new 42,000 square foot facility starting next month. We'll start moving some of our employees in there to, kick the tires on the facility, really try to make sure that we know how to operate out of it, make sure our partners are familiar with the space. And go from there. But we're very excited about it. Our Intelligence Fusion Center, our new EOC, will come online, and it really does. And I know that's a topic of this conversation. Really lean heavily into new and emerging technology.
So when you're looking at technologies, how can they be used to automate the incident management response?
Sorry, I had trouble coming off mute. Well, the way that I think it can automate it is through having really a single point of information coming in, analysis, and then further dissemination. We've really invested heavily in a lot of the tools that we already have, and I know a lot of emergency managers out there have strong feelings pro and against, WebEOC. We've really been able to work with our vendors to customize WebEOC and integrate it with our Esri platform to really create not just an incident management one-stop shop, but also to handle all administrative matters for our agency. So the vision for our agency was really to create a system whereby we can run the agency through that system, whether it be finance, HR matters, personnel request forms, all the way that to resource requests, resource management through an EOC structure. So I think, my team has been very successful at building out that platform over the last really 18 months, testing it, socializing it with the workforce. And I'm very proud of where we are with it. And that's, I think, the way that we can, use the tools that we have and make our agency more efficient and effective.
So sometimes there's a disconnect between, the city, I say the city leadership, the elected officials, the emergency operations center, and then going even further, EOC to the field. What kind of coordination efforts are you using technology to make sure everybody is really in communication with each other?
This is an important part of particularly our field operations. And I know a lot of emergency management agencies have, vehicles that they deploy, command vehicles. And one of the things that we've done is really take our existing platforms like Microsoft Teams, and again, I mentioned WebEOC, and ensure that we're creating chat rooms and situational awareness for our folks in the field and folks back at headquarters in the EOC or in our watch center. And so when we do that and we do it effectively, I think we're really integrating that from the field and from our emergency operations center.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's funny. Yeah, I know we got some pings going on, but Chris is still working, so when he's going through this, so I do apologize about the pings coming across. So when you're taking a look at incident response teams using data analysis and visualization tools, something like what you're using with Esri, what insights are you gaining from those tools to help inform and make decisions?
Well, what it does is it really provides a common operating picture to our partners and stakeholders. I've mentioned WebEOC, our situational awareness dashboards. We're also really able to communicate complex problems and concepts really effectively, including to our leadership and to public safety partners, right? We're able to provide the context that I think our partners need in order to operate more effectively and efficiently. we're also really able to really measure the size and scope of the impacts of the events that we're handling, which I think is really important. Identifying our resource needs and the resource needs of our partners is really critical too, and identifying sort of those trends and threats that we're seeing out in the field.
So when you're looking at that, using that decision making matrix, does technology help you through that process, or does it just keep you informed so you can know that your decisions are making headway?
Well, I do think, in that respect, we do use our capabilities in the Fusion Center to really facilitate that information sharing and maximizing our ability to detect threats. We specifically used a lot of that during in the lead up to the January 6th event, as well as some of the protests and demonstrations we saw in May and June of 2020. We continue to use them to this date in the post January 6th environment. And it really is about giving stakeholders and our public safety partners and law enforcement partners a sense of the threat environment while protecting our community's privacy, civil rights, and civil liberties in terms of being able to express their First Amendment rights. So our Fusion Center analysts are trained on how to look at suspicious activity and behaviors rather than the way someone looks or the way someone dresses, and be able to detect indicators of violence, which of course, in our city or in any city, we really can't tolerate.
I want to talk a little bit about January 6th. I know you and I spoke about this before, but just in the context of what we're talking about regarding deploying people to the field and whatnot, what lessons did you learn as an organization from that January 6th event that maybe you overlooked before?
Yeah, I think as we look back on January 6th and sort of the lessons learned, and I've said this a lot of times before, January 6th wasn't an intelligence failure. There was a widely known there was widely known threat intelligence out there that there would be the strong potential for violence on the 6th. And I think a lot of people will recall that there were demonstrations on the 5th, and a lot of the protesters entered the city and the region on the 3rd and the 4th. And so we did have a sense that there were a lot of people coming, people who were angry and people who frankly bought into a false narrative about the election. Now, what I'm not going to sit here and tell you is that we anticipate, or anyone anticipated, that the Capitol would be breached and that the types of events that unfolded on that day was known beforehand. There was a lot of threat reporting out there. I think the failure on January 6th was really a failure on the part of some of our federal partners and sort of the federal apparatus to really posture to it. I know from the city perspective, when we briefed the mayor, the police chief, and I, we wanted to fully activate all of our resources, including calling up the National Guard, because we did have a sense that there was, again, the strong potential for violence. I will say in the post-January 6th environment, we have really redoubled our efforts to coordinate and share information with our federal partners. Chief Manger at Capitol Police, phenomenal partner. He has a fantastic new director of intelligence, Ravi Saklami, who will share information with us and share plans and really is invested in the partnerships with the city, and we're very grateful for that. The FBI, Secret Service, all of us after January 6th really came to an even stronger realization that we're all linked, even though we live in a city that has overlapping and sometimes contradictory jurisdictions. We do rely on each other, and we really need to strengthen and harden those relationships. So I think we're in a much better place now on that front.
Now, a couple things just kind of for everybody keep in the back of your mind when we're talking about this as well, is that we've seen, just Atlanta just the other day is going through some issues right now with particular First Amendment and then moving into some violence. We saw a lot of that happening in 2020 in the summer with George Floyd protests. So everybody should really kind of, no matter what size city you're in, sort of keep that in the back of their mind of planning for those events. and really working with your partners. And Chris, thank you for bringing that up. How does communication occur, either with technology or maybe even just face to face? But when you're looking at planning for a large scale event like that, what technologies are you using to communicate with each other across platforms?
Yeah, I mean, right now, a lot of that is done through WebEOC and at the Fusion Center level through HSEMA and through classified briefings or regular exchanges with our partners. Of course, we've all seen the tragedies that have occurred in Atlanta and Memphis, and I think just a few minutes ago, right before we came on, the district attorney in Memphis announced charges against the 5 officers in Memphis. And so, I think as those events play out, we here in Washington, D.C. Have already started preparing for the potential for any types of demonstrations, violent or otherwise. We of course recognize here in the nation's capital everyone's right to First Amendment activities and the right to express grievances against their government. But again, what we won't tolerate are people who come to our city, into the nation's capital, to conduct violence and to intimidate people or to conduct property damage. And so we've been coordinating very closely with our federal partners, in particular the region. We are part of the National Capital Region, and we rely very heavily on our strong partnerships in Maryland and Virginia. And so making sure we have the same threat picture and intelligence as they do, and that we're sharing those. The bar and the threshold for reporting intelligence now in this threat environment is very low. And so we want to make sure that, we are able to anticipate any type of violence that might occur in our city.
How many protests or demonstrations, whatever you want to call them, it depends on, I guess, what side of the coin that you're on, if you call it a protest versus demonstration, that you have on a regular basis? I forgot what it was, but you guys have daily events, right?
Yes, hundreds of First Amendment and demonstration activities every year. So I think the average is more than one a day, and that can be everything from a handful of people to tens of thousands. And so we are constantly, and that is something that's very unique to Washington, D.C. as the nation's capital. Our Metropolitan Police Department, our fire and EMS are very, very adept and skilled at how to handle those types of demonstrations, with our federal partners as well, because we see a lot of those activities on federal land, and
Right.
the city has to effectively coordinate with our federal partners on that. But we have a pretty good handle on it. We have the State of the Union coming up in about a week and a half, maybe a couple weeks, February 7th, where that is a national special security event, which is led by the Secret Service. And those planning meetings have already begun. So it's part of our DNA here in Washington, D.C., those relationships, collaboration, and engagements.
Now, what technology do you use or are you using to coordinate? Because like the mall, like just to put it in perspective, as far as I know, correct me if I'm wrong, the mall is federal property, correct?
Yes, that's correct. Park Police.
And the
Territory.
roads between them though are yours.
Yes,
Okay,
that's
so
correct.
there's quick spillover potentially from the mall to. So I like, how do you keep track of what's happening there compared to what's on your property? Like, how does that work?
Well, I think this is where the role of emergency management is so critical, right? And we act as that connective tissue between the law enforcement agencies and between the fire and EMS agencies. So in situations like that where you have multi-agency response and preparedness and response, we will activate the city's EOC from our facility and have all those representatives there, as well as other departments will activate their operations centers and have our liaisons there. So that redundancy is good. It's effective. And as long as we are sharing information and we're checking in with each other, even on an hourly basis when there are large scale events happening, we can have a more effective security posture. And in the event something goes awry, we can have an effective response.
And then how do you stay connected with your team in the field? What mobile technology, is there for you to outside of, I mean, I guess I'm guessing radios of some sort, but what else are you using to keep track of where
Yeah.
everybody's?
Yeah, obviously our radio system, we have a very, very strong SWIC in the district who's able to really corral the federal partners on interoperability and the region. We regularly utilize our FirstNet phones, and we're testing those in the city. They appear to be working fairly well, so we can communicate that way. But most of the time, it's on radios as well as on our phones, making sure that everyone in the field has access to, simply to Teams, where we have group chats on there. We can send pictures, we can keep records of an incident that's accessible to, those who are invited into those chat rooms. And so that also really helps us on resource management and coordination.
Now, with this op tempo that you have going on, it seems like it's, I mean, for most jurisdictions, it sounds like it's crazy, but you're probably used to it. Do you have time to fit in like training and exercises and that kind of stuff? I mean, or is it just go, go, go?
Yeah, we're very fortunate in the district. We are well resourced to conduct the training and exercise. We have the state training officer. We have created over the last couple of years HSEMA Academy, which we have an LMS that is really effective at tracking training and making sure people are getting certified in their EOC positions, and in other FEMA certifications. So we do, and we have a big training team. We do take the time to make sure our employees are trained up, and that we do have things as far as like lunch and learns and regular engagements with our staff.
Yeah. And again, apologize for the pinging. Chris is still working, so he can't turn that off.
I'm ignoring it. I can't turn it off.
And so with that, so you have the training, you're going, everybody's kind of sharpening sharpening the saw, if you will, keeping up abreast, and you have this crazy op tempo. I mean, are you using technology to monitor? I want to say monitor, not let's like follow people around, but like monitor the status of your employees and what they're able to do and where they're at and how you can help them.
Yeah, we have, and we have experimented with putting our staff in the field during large events. We generally will do that with the concurrence of our Metropolitan Police Department, so they know where we are, and what we're doing, and our federal partners if it's on federal land. And we train a very, very select number of people in how to do that, and give them the communications equipment that they might need to effectively operate in the field. Otherwise, our team is in our command vehicle, which would be staged a little bit away from where a main event might be happening. Again, just for redundancy and effective sort of coordination away from a particular event. So we have a pretty good handle on where our people are when we do that. Again, very small teams. If we see the need to, if it's a really large event, but in general, we won't necessarily put people right in the thick of things if not requested to by our law enforcement partners.
Are you using cloud computing and visualization I can't even say that word, and to visualize ooh, speaking to visualize and scale your response efforts?
Yeah, we utilize a sort of a suite of products to manage incidents from within the physical EOC, out to partner agencies, and to any like field command posts that we have with internet that have internet access. Now, the base product for that, which will allow us to operate out of multiple locations, is both inside and outside the agency, is that web EOC platform that I talked to you about. Now, that application is hosted within a cloud-based backend storage and virtual environment, and it's built, upon a load balance sort of architecture, utilizing multiple servers. And so, I think we're able to really I think, operate more effectively and quickly with that type of architecture.
If you could, you know, as I asked this question, king of the world here, and you could just snap your fingers and make everything perfect. What are some of the things that you'd like to see happen in technology that would make life easier for your organization?
Yeah, I think automation is important, and how we go about speeding up incident triage and prioritization. I think about like how we utilize street cameras, for example, to identify incidents and automatically dispatch resources. We're getting there. We're not quite there yet, and also just developing integrated platforms. It seems like a lot of our departments and agencies utilize different platforms. And if we could, look at the APIs and see how we can better integrate those platforms, and even, dare I say, procure similar products or the same products, so we can scale. That would be phenomenal, because then I think information could be shared seamlessly and in an automatic way. I mean, there will always be some human element to information sharing, but the more that we can automate and institutionalize and share platforms, I think the better off we'll be in response and coordination and incident management.
Going on to the information sharing, and I know that we've this is one of the things we've been working really hard. We, the whole collective, we in emergency response, since 9/11. Are we still far away from being? I guess we're never gonna be perfect, but are we still far away from being perfect with information sharing, or is it still siloed too much?
That's a tough question to answer. I think that we're better in some respects. Sorry about that. We're
Yeah, no.
better in some respects, but not good in others. Particularly with our law enforcement, and how we share and how information is shared with the emergency management agencies. As a former intel officer, I had never thought about the role of emergency management, and how it brings interagency and, in our case, citywide coordination. We bring all the other agencies to the table. And while, the Metropolitan Police Department is a phenomenal partner and there's no one better that does response, I do think that there's a role for emergency management in public safety, in bringing and coordinating all those elements together. So I think in some respects that, the emergency management agencies are, there's an uneven, I think, role and recognition of that role across the country, and in the vital position of emergency managers to coordinate and make sure that everyone is getting the information they need, within strict compartmentalization and understanding sensitivity. But if we do need to bring other partners in, and there is a recovery phase to a major incident, it's best to bring your emergency manager in sooner in the process than not.
Yeah, that's a good point. David asks, can we expand upon on what platforms that you're using?
We do use WebEOC, Esri, ArcGIS. We do use Microsoft Teams, as I mentioned. That's across the city, and really incorporated First Alert into our Fusion Center so that they can kind of look at any threats and alerts that might come up.
Let's talk about the threat assessment and threat analysis. I have a company that I use that where I get alerts to my phone. And it's just, I mean, it's amazingly the company. I think it's Alert to Us is the name of what I use. And it's I don't know how it scrubs the internet or whatever it does, but sometimes it's giving me information before it hits the news. Um, you know, programs like that, and there's a few of them out there. I'm not condoning one or the other, but what do you use stuff like that to be able to be ahead of the game, if you will, like to be able to get the information come into your phone before it hits the news, or like what kind of systems are you using for that?
Yeah, I mentioned First Alert, but we also have some vendors that we use for social media exploitation, through our Fusion Center, which I know that is something that a lot of fusion centers are using. And so, I think if folks want to hear more about sort of the tools that we're using, certainly reach out to me. I know our fusion center is very secretive, not secretive, but like they're very jittery about talking about our vendors, but we're happy to kind of talk about that. We've invested a lot of money in that capability over the last several years, to the point where I think we do provide a lot of value even to the federal government in looking at threats to the Capitol and to our region.
Nikki Jones asks, what active listening tools do you use?
Yeah, so again, I mentioned First Alert, and there are other ones that we can use that we can. I'm happy to get in touch with anyone to talk about it. But in some cases, we're under sort of agreements not to sort of reveal some of those. But we can. I'm happy to talk more about it.
Yeah, that's a good question, Nick. Yeah. I think it's kind of cool. There's the other side of that too. There's a lot of open source stuff that you can use. Like here in California, you can go and almost like pop onto any Caltrans camera that's out there. It's open, and so those are really great tools that we use here, especially when you're looking at roadway problems, specifically for evacuations. You can sort of plan around the messaging there. And I want to get into messaging here for a second, because I mean, like DC, outside of the urban center that it is, you have visitors coming from around the world, literally, to visit. You have dignitaries from around the world there. How do you message to people where they understand, what it is, like how to get off the Beltway, or like where they're evacuated? Because like, and I've for people who've never been there, I'm going to explain this a little bit deeper. Is like you could drive around the Beltway and go through like 4 states, or including DC, right? So DC, Maryland, Virginia, pretty quickly. You can get to West Virginia pretty fast from there.
Yeah.
So how do you message things to people, and really explain like how to do what you want them to do, and in what languages they understand?
Yeah, so we, in the district, we do have language access capabilities in all of our public messaging. So we want to make sure that, we're doing and we're sort of putting out information across a variety of languages that are spoken frequently in the National Capital Region, in the District of Columbia. The primary way we do that is through Alert DC, which is, I mentioned previously, is in the event of and I know a lot of jurisdictions have this capability, in the event of a large scale disaster and we needed to communicate with even out of towners and visitors to the district, we would probably use WIA. And we used WIA on January 6th twice, and to impose curfews and to tell people to stay clear of the Capitol and the surrounding areas. So that isn't an extreme case, but most of the time what we'll do is, if we do need to put out public messaging, we'll ask our federal partners, because most of those visitors go to federal landmarks. We'll ask our federal partners to amplify any messages that we might need to distribute to visitors to the district. But we have 700,000 residents in the city. For Alert DC, we're getting close to about 200,000 people who have signed up for it. So it's not a bad yield on our Alert DC system, and we're just going to keep messaging that and making sure people know how to sign up.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the critical part there, is getting people to participate in the system. Some of the stuff that we're doing, just to kind of at Titan HST, is we have the ability to share information in English, and it'll go and it will translate automatically to the person's language who they're on their phone, which I think is really kind of cool and critical. And then messaging specifically, so people understand what they are. That's a whole nother art, right? And so working hard to craft messages where people understand what you're trying to tell them to do. That's the other side of it. I know that Dr. Dennis Milletti He's passed away during the COVID crisis. He had really a lot of great work on the sociological aspect of sending those messages out, and I know that's critical. When you look at this specifically, I know we talked a lot about protests and what like that, but you have other emergencies as well, snow, weather events. How are you managing those, and what technology are you using to manage the weather events that come towards you?
Yeah, we've had some severe weather here in the district over the last few years. A lot of ways that we'll manage those is using a lot of the National Weather Service tools to communicate with the public. We can use, and we do have some other weather service platforms that we use to feed into, for example, ArcGIS, to create dashboards in terms of if we have some of our traditional areas that flood, we can sort of see how that's operating. The National Weather Service also does a very good job at looking at our flood gauges across the district, so we can display them as well to see whether we're reaching a medium or high level of flooding, particularly on our coastal areas around Georgetown, for example, and the wharf. We can really kind of see if we're getting into any trouble there. So and then we'll message that. We'll work with our Department of Transportation and Metropolitan Police Department to message areas that if they do get closed for severe weather, we can push that out very quickly through Everbridge and through our Alert DC platform.
What are the biggest challenges that you are facing right now as an organization?
Yeah, well, I think for us, again, we talked about this at our all hands meeting yesterday. It's really, with our new facility coming online, a big challenge for us is going to be orienting our staff and our partners to operating in a new facility where the district EOC will be and the fusion center. And so we're going to take the next sort of 5-6 months to really do. You mentioned before, Todd, questions about training and exercise, to really bring our partners into our new space and train with them on how to operate out of there, because it's going to be crucial for us to coordinate and manage incidents. So I am excited about the prospect of our new space. We are planning to do a full EOC activation out of there for our July 4th celebrations here in the district. And so, we don't have a lot of time, but a big challenge for us is going to be orienting our staff and our partners to our new space. And, I tell our partners, both federal, state, and local, that the facility is really built for them, right? As emergency management professionals, we're agencies of partnerships. And if our partners don't buy in to what it is we're selling, it's not going to work, right? Our enterprise is not going to work. And so we're really, really doubling down on tours, on making sure they know where they're going to sit and how they're going to operate, because the power that we have is as collaborators and as persuaders and as people who can bring others together. And so that's going to be really important and a big challenge for us over the next year.
When you have talked to people who are getting into emergency management, what piece of advice do you have to the new students and to the new people joining emergency management?
I think the core and the root of emergency management is to be a collaborator and a coordinator. And I think about, as we hire people into our agency, we don't need people who, it's good and it's great, who have like advanced degrees or know everything about emergency management. We often talk about, we need good coordinating humans, right? People who can get along with other people. We can teach the core skill sets and the doctrine and the policies and the procedures. We've had people with very little emergency management experience who have come into our agency who are phenomenal emergency managers now, because they get along with people. They don't come off as trying to impede on others' missions, but rather to help and to support and to coordinate. And I think that's really important. It's the mindset that you bring to emergency management that is very critical and can mean more than what's written on a resume or what's written down on paper, or all the certificates and certifications that you have. If you can't get along with people, this is a very challenging profession, because we do rely on our partners, right? I I'm very fortunate in my city that we have great relationships with our police department, right, with our fire department, and we have to make sure that we continue to facilitate those relationships.
So Nikki Jones asks, are you looking for those same skill sets in partners? It's a good question, Nikki.
Yeah, it's a great question. We are looking for those same skill sets in our partners, and I think, though, I would say that with the caveat that as emergency managers, again, I've only been doing emergency management for 5 years since I got this job, a little over 5 years, my 6th year now. My sense is that emergency managers sometimes don't do a very good job at showing it. I guess educating is probably the wrong word, but I can't think of a better one right now. Educating our partners on the value that we bring to them. And my goal is for us to be as respected and known as police and fire. Maybe that'll never happen, but emergency managers do deserve that level of respect and praise, because we're often pulled into issues that homelessness, gun violence, migrants. We're pulled into these issues that just like, well, we don't know who owns this, so just give it to emergency management. And I think sometimes we have to be better at saying no, or saying like, then you need to resource us at the level that of the expectations that are placed on us.
Yeah.
Um, and and I think that we have to do that for our partners. And I think our partners, once they see the value in what it is we bring, they will become better collaborators or coordinators as well. I think sometimes they don't know what to do with us. They don't know kind of like how we fit into everything. And I think we just have to demonstrate that and show it and take the time to invest in those relationships. I hope that answers the question.
I think so. And I agree with you there. We are poor salespeople when it comes to we
Well, and I think, why I think, Todd, is because I've thought a lot about this. Maybe I'm wrong, but it's also because we are we're probably, so I think about police and fire are very good at advocacy, and they're very good at advocating for the resources that they need to do their jobs. We are by nature collaborators, and we want everyone to get along. And so I think sometimes we're not as good at being aggressively, be an aggressive advocate for our resources. And I think sometimes that can hold us back. I mean, there are other emergency management agencies that are probably very well resourced and do a great job. I think for the vast majority of us, we are not resourced at the level of the expectations that are placed on us.
Question comes in is, what is your suggestion for interim platform? They're currently in between crisis management softwares. And many have not access to the trainer several more months. MS Teams has not worked as well as multiple jurisdictions to coordinate. Yeah, I can understand that for sure. So yeah, what is your recommendation? I know what you're using, but is there other stuff out there that you think that could work just as well and kind of get out of that whole Teams environment?
Yeah, that's a tough question. I mean, we've looked at Slack and trying to use that. The challenge is, and it's a hard question to answer, because and we have and long before I got here to this role, and I know like 10, 15 years ago, we had tried to sort of go out on our own and try to bring others to some platforms that we were using. And it didn't work well. I think, the first thing you got to do is take an inventory of what others are using and try to build consensus around, okay, can we look at different platforms and can we all agree that this, we'll invest in this one? Or, should we bring in different companies, as we did, actually? We brought in a bunch of different vendors and had them basically, it was almost like a Shark Tank thing, where we just basically told them, like, here are our requirements, here's what we need, what could you actually do for us? And not only did we bring them in to talk to us about that, but we brought our partners in as well. In particular, police and fire, who, and our 911 call center, to make sure that, like, if we had it, we would have critical mass in terms of the buy-in for going to a common platform. So I think you really need to look at what you have and what's in the inventory, what your partners are using, assess those tools, and then try to build consensus around one or two of them, ideally one, and really try to, like, invest in that, train on it, know how to use it. It just so happens that our city uses Microsoft Teams, so it'd be foolhardy for us to go, for the emergency management agency, to go off and try to build another platform or do another platform, because all of our city workers know how to use Microsoft Teams, and it worked for us. And if it's not working for you, like, I'm also happy to put you with our folks who have figured out how to make it useful as you search for a new tool.
Yeah, and I'm gonna piggyback on that because I agree. It's using the tools that work for you. And one thing that I've noticed through my years, right, is that if you buy some of the stuff that's out of the box and that's not specifically made with your specs in mind, it's hard sometimes to use that. So if you're buying Microsoft Teams, for instance, which is, it's a very large program, a lot of people use it. Being able to customize it for you particular use sometimes is harder. But if you work with smaller vendors that are able to customize things for you, sometimes they'll do it at no cost. Some of the stuff that we do at Titan, we'll customize at no cost if it makes sense for across the board. So that's an example of working with smaller vendors than the large box vendors, if you will. Any other questions specifically for, oh God, wait, there's more question coming in. Let me see here. Oh yeah. Oh, she's answered. Okay, yeah. So yeah, Deanna, so I hope that answered your question. It seems like you got a couple of things they're building for custom. Cool. So any other questions specifically for Chris regarding technology and what's going on, or any questions they can answer about emergency management in Washington, DC? I'll give a couple more seconds. Chris, I just want to say thank you so much for your time today. It's always great talking to you. I know that you're super busy over there in that crazy high op tempo city that you're in. Glad you're doing it, and I'm not.
Well, I do apologize. I'm not very good at tech. They got me this new computer, and I was able to silence everything. So I do apologize. I wasn't able to do that beforehand. I apologize to your listeners as well. It won't happen again.
Oh, Lydia has a question. Chris, do you personally have a favorite type of technology? That's a good question.
Yeah, great question. Yes, I do. And it's any type of technology that is very visual based. That's why I like Esri and ArcGIS, is because I like maps and I like numbers and just really good visuals. And the reason why I like that is because our political leaders like that too. And it's able to really distill down a lot of information into its essentials. My goal for our new facility, the vision is that the police chief, the mayor, the city administrator, the police chief, the fire chief, any city executive could walk into our watch center, our fusion center, our EOC, and have immediate situational awareness on what's going on in their city. Everything from a road closure to a government building that might have an HVAC problem to an active terrorism case. I want them to know what's going on in their city. So tools that help distill a lot of information in a visual way, in a way that's pleasing to the eye, because that does matter, are ones that we'll invest in.
Awesome. Yeah, it does matter. I think that's why ArcGIS is really a great dashboard to use across the board on things. Because they put a lot of time and effort into building that. Absolutely. And a lot of integrations too. They have APIs with a lot of other platforms. All right. Any other questions for Chris? Oh, and Nick says thank you for both. It was a really interesting conversation. How do we reach both of you? Sure, Chris, how can people find you?
Yeah, so please, my and I can type the answer in there if it's seen by everyone. I can just send you my email.
You can put in the chat.
Can put it in the chat. Yeah, it's pretty easy. It's just chris.rodriguez@dc.gov. So if anyone needs any information, or if we could ever be of any help, and certainly if you got, if any of the issues that I mentioned on the webinar, and you're like, oh yeah, we know how to do that. I mean, we don't have all the answers, so we're happy to also learn from what other jurisdictions are doing.
Absolutely. Yeah, awesome. Well, great. And everybody, thank you so much for spending time with us today. It's always a good conversation to have and looking at different platforms and what people are using. Chris, thank you again for being open and having this conversation. And I would love to do this again sometime.
Thanks so much, Todd. I appreciate everyone being on. Thank you.
Take care, and everybody stay safe and stay hydrated.